Up next today is Katherine White, an associate curator at the Henry Ford. They will be discussing Henry Ford's large collection of Girard materials that she has been researching and bringing to the public attention, with her talk today called Uncovering the Girard Collection at the Henry Ford. Please come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, great. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you again for inviting me to be here. It has been just a fantastic couple of days. Okay, so I'm talking about the Girard collection at the Henry Ford today. And first things first, I have to always say it. You're all thinking it. The Henry Ford is a car museum, right? It's not, actually. Henry Ford was our founder, and he did also found Ford Motor Company. But he was also a voracious collector and created this vast museum complex in order to house these things and bring them to the public. So he liked chairs. And there's some machines back there, too, you can see. And ceramics, and I promise we no longer store them that way. This is from 1952. And we sometimes joke that he never saw a spinning wheel that he didn't like. This is the Henry Ford's mission today. It keeps with the spirit of Henry Ford's collecting, but we collect really American innovation, ingenuity, and resourcefulness. And as all of us in this room know, design checks those boxes over and over and over again. So fittingly, design is a big part of our collection. We have over 26 million artifacts, and I think that's an outdated number because it just keeps growing. 2 years ago, we acquired almost a third of the American Textile History Museum that closed down in Lowell, Massachusetts, and there were 6 semi-trucks full. I don't know how many, but this number has to be increasing. And it includes everything from, you'll see, Gothic steam engines, Allegheny locomotive, studio glass from the Toledo workshop, the Rosa Parks bus, there's a porcupine thresher. That's what this little strange thing is here. Yeah. It's really a fantastic collection that sees, you always find new things, always. And design holds a large footprint on our museum floor. I know, that's a great reaction, right? I had that too. So this is Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion house, and a very popular exhibit in a corner of the museum. And more recently installed is Mathematica, an exhibit by Charles and Ray Eames and the rest of the Eames office. This was installed just 2 years ago, about 2 years ago now exactly. So we like design, is my point. We like cars too, and porcupine threshers and all that other stuff. But design has a good home at the Henry Ford. So moving on to our relationship with Herman Miller, we are fortunate to have a long-standing, really fantastic relationship with Herman Miller. In 1988, they created the Herman Miller Consortium, the 13 institutions, 13 museums, and they named the Henry Ford as the lead institution, citing our focus on process, and we'll be talking a lot about process today, and on innovation and on manufacturing as well. And this was very soon followed by 2 really major donations of objects. There's some examples up there. First, in 1989, over 2,000 objects, varied in time, varied in designer. There's Nelson, Rohde, Protzman, Eames, Girard, all of them. And it ranges from, like I say here, trade catalogs and invitations to bedroom sets and so on. So really a rich collection there. And then just a couple of years later, over 3,000 objects that are just Girard. Huge, I mean, just really quite incredible. So here is part of the Girard collection in our storage facility today. Let's see, all the boxes here are just chock full of fabric as well. And typically, this is a photo from last week. So this is usually also full, but of hundreds of textile sample cards that are currently being rehoused for better access. But usually that's all full. And then this side over here, rolled fabrics and environmental enrichment panels, which we'll talk more about later. So here are just some random examples I pulled. Print trials and ties, swatches, wallpaper, pillows, just, again, a really incredible collection. But I have to, I'm sure, again, maybe you're wondering, the title of my presentation is Uncovering the Girard Collection, and yet I just told you it's been here almost 30 years. So what happened? The late 80s, early 90s were a really busy time for the Henry Ford. There's a lot going on, really incredible things happening. New exhibit development. Oh, sorry. Okay. That's sneaky. Sure. Is that better? Okay. So it was quite a busy time for the Henry Ford. There were major exhibitions in development, permanent exhibitions that equated to more than half of the museum floor. The campus also holds really an open air museum with over 89 buildings, from the Wright Home to Edison's Menlo Park. It's really a massive campus. We had just moved an entire farmstead with outbuildings. So again, a really busy time. So fortunately, the very wise leadership brought this collection to us, said, yes, absolutely, we will take it, we will take care of it, and they stored it in our climate-controlled environment, and then it kind of sat there for quite some time. And as turnover occurs, the collection became a little misunderstood. It was always known to be just fantastic in its breadth and depth and the color and its Girard and just lovely. But it became known more as a shadow collection. And what I mean by that is that, let's say Herman Miller has 3 ties. Well, and of the same design. Well, they're going to keep 2 and they might give us 1, right? To kind of create more access to these things. So not to say that kind of collection wouldn't be fantastic again, but perhaps not singular. There were not objects that were totally one of a kind. And with 26 million plus artifacts and a pretty lean curatorial staff, the focus went elsewhere. So a couple years ago, right before I was hired, there was a book coming out. It's Amy Asherman's book over there. And her and our colleague Sam Grau were at the museum looking for some material, and they unrolled one of those rolls that I showed you, and they found the Textiles and Objects banner. Just fantastic. I mean, that is singular. That is fantastic. That's one of a kind. So there it is on the right, and then of course there's a photo of the storefront from Arts and Architecture magazine from 1961. So this kind of shattered that whole understanding of the collection. If that's there, then what else is? I was hired here's a detail shot. I was hired just shortly afterwards, and not for the purpose of going through this collection, but I came in with a love of this era and a love especially of Girard, and I had no idea. And so, I mean, you can imagine my absolute delight when I came in and found this just treasure trove waiting for me. So over the last couple of years, as much as I've been able, I have had the pleasure of working through the collection and seeing what exists, what's here. And so today I'm showing you just a couple of really interesting things that I found. They are mostly process related. That's something, again, that the Henry Ford really values, and we really enjoy the peek that it gives us into Girard's mind and his hand. So we are going to continue with the Textiles and Objects shop. I am just really pleased that you've had a great introduction to that this morning. And we're going to talk specifically about the mirrors. You've seen them a couple times now, which again, that was just was not planned, but that worked really well. Here are 2 such mirrors. These are both from Wright 20, sold at auction in the last decade or so. These mirrors were created for the T&O shop. They're an interesting marriage of textiles and objects, and I think they're also quite architectural. And so we've got quite a bit of process material that can help us understand these better. On the left there, very clearly this document tells us the 4 styles A, B, C, and D, very creatively named. And then we have blueprints for many of them. So on the right, there is one for the style B mirror. These are incredibly detailed and in Girard's hand. Then these just fantastic color studies, mock-ups. This one I really appreciate because it's not quite finished. We see he's taken the blue line print and then he's pasting these blocks on these blocks of fabric on top. So I just transcribed on the bottom half there the notes from one of the blueprints, and I think there are two things I pick out here. The first is that all fabrics are to be selected by Girard. And this is interesting to me because we know that later on he passed that along to the purchaser. But here he's choosing to do that himself. And then later on in number 4, he's calling these fabric-covered blocks, which again, these seem so architectural to me, and he's using the same kind of nomenclature with these as well. So here's just this beautiful gift that I had someone create for me. I'm not very tech savvy. To show you all the different colors. And we've talked quite a bit today about how Girard was just truly a mastermind of color, and he was in every sense of the word. But I also want to say that some of these aren't bright and bold. Some of these are neutrals. And he was also a master of neutrals. The backgrounds that he chose for his interiors really showcased some of those colors, but then here he's choosing some neutrals as well, and I think that they're absolutely masterful. This one's interesting to me. On the right there is a prototype mirror of the T&L mirror in the collection, and this is quite close to a production piece. You can see the main difference there is the circular joinery pieces, that fabric. Of course, that would be brass later on. But really a fantastic prototype. And then on the left, this color study that is inverse of the prototype. Okay, so moving on to environmental enrichment panels, design drawings. This is a Charles Eames photograph from Herman Miller, one that we've, I think, seen a couple times today, but really it's just such a fantastic photograph. It's worth seeing, 10 times a day. It's okay. So before we get to the design drawings, talking about our larger collection, there are 40 of these, 40 designs for these panels. We have 38 of the 40 in our collection, and multiples of most. And another just fantastic piece about these staying in storage for almost 30 years is that they're pristine. I mean, they came off the line and then they were put away. And so the colors are just so true. And they can really tell us a lot about what he was intending. Because textiles, of course, are subject to light damage, and many of the ones that we can see now have had some light damage. So this is not something that we do all the time. This was a special tour last year for some people that came, and we decided to get them all out. And this had never been done before. The ballroom, Henry Ford liked to dance. Who knew? So he built this just pretty lovely ballroom, or an ornate ballroom, and it was the only indoor space that could fit them all. So there are actually, I would say 38 tables, but there are more because the Textile and Objects banner is over there, and then in the other corner that you can't see, the other half, this is really half, and the other half of the room includes other panels as well as some of the T&L tablecloths. Okay. So here's just a little short video that our production team did that day. Because this was such an effort to get them all out, and it was just a treat. I mean, we had our current president came down to see the panels out. We had most of the staff, I think, the permanent staff came through, because it was just incredible. And to see people interact with these panels, those who don't have any idea who Girard is, see the joy on their faces. It was just really a fantastic day. But it took some work. It was our collections management team. They had some words for me. But I told them that they were going to be featured in this video, this presentation, and they were happier. So it's appreciated. So some of the design drawings. We have over 100 drawings, blueprints, blue line prints, that color identification studies that were related to the panels, 2/3 of which have already undergone paper conservation in the last couple of years, which is great. I was just really thrilled when they made that a priority. And the other third are in the studio as we speak. Well, it's Saturday, so maybe Monday, but these are interesting. So this is Jar of Pebbles. I'm going to show you a couple of these and just talk about some Just little things that we can glean about process. So at the bottom there, you see the close-up here. Ignore the smudging. That's just an effective tape. But we are looking at the tape. Something happened. Either he changed his mind, or perhaps a mistake was made. But instead of starting over, maybe he started at the top, who knows, he cut out this bottom piece and taped a piece of paper over the back to then continue. I found that very interesting. Our paper conservator hadn't seen much like that in the past, so she was quite intrigued. Here's Old Sun and New Sun, and of course the same subject with a very different treatment, looking into the very different spirit of both of these. I hope you can see this well. I guess you can. And this one, Old Sun, I appreciate the marker strokes. They reflect, both of these really, the strokes that he's using reflect the spirit of the subject. I find that fascinating. So Old Sun, it looks almost like moire or watered silk, curvilinear, biomorphic, and then on the right, New Sun has no curves except for in the face. It's obviously incredibly geometric, and his marker, his hand, reflects that as well. Eyes. This one is interesting because we know he had a blue marker. We have the ribbons panel, which is blue and pink, but instead of coloring the iris blue, he used paper. And so you can see on the opposite side there, on the back, the iris and the pupil are paper layered, not marker. And I think the reason he's doing this is because he's testing eye color, right? Color location only. He's looking at what colors he wanted to use. So these were very much, this to me says that this is a very active document. Girls, of course. This is in verse, if you look closely. It is quite small. You'll see that in just a minute. It's kind of like a color by number, right? These were, of course, screen printed, and we know that the more colors in a print, the more complicated, the more screens need to be used. Girls was the most colorful, had the most colors included, 8, and so there were 8 screens. So I think to aid Herman Miller in manufacture, he created this very interesting color number identification to show exactly which part was supposed to be which color. And here you see it, the larger, it's not a great photo. I'm standing on like a chair and then also a box. It's not great workplace safety. But the other one is to scale, so you can see the size there. But the numbers can help the manufacturer to print it correctly. Okay, moving on to etched fabric designs, and just to kind of get us all on the same level, the same playing field, let's talk about what is an etched fabric design. Here is a definition from a guide to textiles for interiors. It's a version of acid printing, different than screen printing, applied to blended fabrics with a combination of acid-resistant and acid-degradable fibers. So it creates this really interesting texture. It burns out patterned sections of fabric, leaving sheer sections of design on a textured background. And these are, of course, not Girard. So make sure I say that. These are images from the Cooper Hewitt and the V&A from the 20s and 30s. But I just wanted to get these images in your mind as we move forward. And you might say, Girard didn't do etched fabric designs. He worked in wovens and screen printed textiles. But as I was working through the other design drawings for the environmental enrichment panels, we found 9 blueprints labeled etched fabric designs that were never produced. These are from March 1970, just fantastic. So I'm gonna go through the 9 quite quickly, and then we'll see them all again together. So here's drops, squares, small chevron, large chevron, chevron stripe, chevron square, diamonds, and facade. And jagged stripe, there's 9. And here they all together. Sorry, my font got kind of messed up a little bit here. But here they all are. So what's interesting is that these are designs that of course could have been screen printed, but that wasn't, I believe that wasn't the effect he was going for. We know that Girard appreciated texture in his environments. Monica has used the word accumulative vision, and I think that this is another example of that this etched or burnout prints, they create really physical tactile texture in a textile. And he was, I believe that he was looking for that. But we know they were never produced. Obviously, we've talked about Herman Miller and what a fantastic employer company they are. They really value their designers. Some quotes here, but the designers make the final decision. There's a brochure on the right in small print that says Herman Miller is Alexander Girard. This is a series they did. Design, of course, made Herman Miller what it was and what it is, and they're a fantastic company. But also, we know, going back to here, that this is an entirely different manufacturing process. In 1970, when they're starting to move away from the retail market, moving into the office environment, his casement fabrics are selling best, and it's likely, I think, that they're still a business. They were likely unwilling to completely switch out all manufacturing processes, find a contractor perhaps to manufacture these, so they never were. That said, if you have any information, I found these last month. So I've talked to some people here about them and have not it's met with surprise, but I find these incredibly interesting. So I just showed you a motley assortment of things, and to leave you, I just want to go through a couple of the takeaways that I've had going through this collection and through some of these discoveries. And the first is that Girard's design process was deliberate and extensive, that he approached textile work as an architect in industry, textile architect, as Jochen has called him, creating form-defining space in the work that he did in objects and textiles and interiors. He came at it as an architect. He did encounter boundaries, was told no, which I think makes the breadth and depth of his work just so much more impressive. We know that he was incredibly prolific, and yet, what would that have been like? Had he never been told no? I'm not sure the answer to that. And then lastly, that nothing exists in isolation, that Girard constantly sought connectivity, relationships between craft and industry. We're here today for that. People and cultures and the environments that we inhabit. Thank you.